Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to jump into the magical world of politics, but if you're looking at the title, something massive has actually happened. Now, Donald Trump got elected into the U.S. presidency, and his first, day has been pretty massive. We're talking over 1,000 pardons. We're talking executive orders out the wazoo. But one thing that is really important to me in my channel, because I talk about cybersecurity, I talk about the dark web, I talk about crazy criminal shenanigans and spooky aspects of the internet. One of those is Donald Trump going, I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht to let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement, which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences and 40 years. Ridiculous. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, I was going to cover this a little bit sooner, literally the day it happened. But to be fair, I really can't cover this without going over the insane story. Now, if you don't know the name Ross William Ulbricht, Ross Ulbricht is one of the original runners of one of the largest dark web marketplaces on the internet. In fact, it's so old, when I started deep web browsing, this actually wasn't even a place that I think I could visit for a while, okay? It was a marketplace that was gone the moment I had even started to cover the dark web years ago. Now, obviously, Trump pardoned the former founder of one of the most infamous dark web marketplaces as a promise to the Libertarian Party supporting him. This was a day one pledge. So basically, it's kind of a check that is cashed in at this point, and that's effectively what happened. You can see an image of Ross, who originally would have been serving a life sentence, leaving federal prison, and of course, being pardoned. That smile on his face shows you a man that's retrieved his freedom back. Now, for anybody that needs to know what Silk Road was an anonymous marketplace where people could sell a whole bunch of goods on the internet. And a lot of those goods included things that were related to, as you're looking at, drugs. And this is one surviving screenshot, and I'll probably look through some of the older dark web stuff if maybe I might have come across this. I may have. But there were drugs being sold, drug paraphernalia, there was weapons, there were, again, things related to criminal enterprises. Now, from what I understand, from what I've actually researched and looked into it, I think that this basically allowed a lot of illegal things to be sold with the possible exception of CSAM material, which I don't think was sold. But when you're talking about murderers for hire, drugs, basically weapons in general, this was a Amazon.com equivalent for anything illegal. It was a place where Ross didn't serve as somebody that would sell these drugs, but he kind of served as a fixer, a facilitator, somebody that operated the marketplace, making it easier for the average drug seller to participate and sell their materials to people all over the internet. And during his time, when it came to, again, his conviction, he actually did plead to the judge about why he made the Silk Road. And of course, in one of his letters, he said, in creating Silk Road, I ruined my life and destroyed my future. I squandered the inviolable upbringing my family provided me, all the opportunities I have been given, and the ones I have earned, and my talents. I have done so much more with my life. I see that now, but it is too late. You are charged with sentencing me to at least 20 years. In 20 years, I could have made a positive contribution to society. Without breaking the law, in 20 years, I could have raised a family. And a lot of it came down into his letter where he said, I created Silk Road because I believed at the time that people should have the right to buy and sell whatever they wanted as long as they weren't hurting anyone else. But this is a little bit more complicated because while Ross doesn't want other people to hurt, anyone, it doesn't seem like Ross necessarily cares so much about hurting people, but I'll get to that in a little bit because the story gets fucking insane. But yeah, he sort of became a plight. There's an entire website, freeross.org, where again, they kind of talk about, hey, he's in prison since 2013, first-time offender, all nonviolent convictions, and he got 2 life sentences and 40 years without parole, which is a pretty insane fucking punishment to be doled out. Now, while Silk Road is kind of based on the, obvious Silk Road trade route, in terms of the dark web, there are plenty of actual stores that anybody can go to where, again, they could buy from these massive marketplaces. So Silk Road was kind of the first one, and after that came things like Agora, Alphabay, Dream Marketplace, and Hydra. And the thing about any of these marketplaces is they kept getting bigger and bigger. When you shut down the Silk Road, everyone started to use other marketplaces. And it really showed that the revenues behind these marketplaces were in the millions. And of course, when it came to sales, Silk Road actually ended up processing an insane amount of sales, totaling up to somewhere around 9.5 million Bitcoin at the time. So one of the investigators here even straight up said, all told, the site has generated sales revenue totaling 9.5 million Bitcoins and collected commissions from these sales totaling over 600,000 Bitcoins. Now, again, if you looked at 600,000 Bitcoins, I mean, hell, alone, if you look at 9.5 million something Bitcoin, I think 9.519664 is, again, the actual, this is the total amount. And again, if you converted that amount of money into today's Bitcoin value, you're looking at nearly $1 trillion US, showing just how much Bitcoin has evolved. At the time of Silk Road, this number is obviously far smaller, but it shows you that when Bitcoin was first started to be, like, when it first came out, obviously the first place it was being traded around and used as a currency was something like Silk Road. So Ross Ulbricht and his platform literally gave Bitcoin one of the first major case uses, which were illegal transactions of illegal goods all over the internet. It gave all these criminals and people who wanted to buy drugs, for instance, the ability to transact in an anonymous system. As long as nobody knew who was behind the account, which at the time there weren't really a lot of things like KYC or AML laws in crypto, people really just use this as an anonymous way to move money quickly and buy and purchase drugs or other illegal things on the internet. Now, when you look at those commissions, which according to the US government was around 600,000 Bitcoins at the time, if you kept all those Bitcoins and you decided to hold on to them, you are literally looking at 60 billion, almost $61 billion worth of Bitcoins, right? Now, obviously, the US government has actually seized a lot of this money, and they actually ended up selling it for literally nothing at the time. So according to the math over here, when they sold all of these Bitcoins, so for instance, the 144,000 Bitcoins that were seized by the US Marshal Services, when those were sold for around $48 million, which translates again to $334 each, yeah, it is that if the US government held on to those Bitcoins, right now they'd be looking at like over what, like $1 billion? Insane shit for them. They actually straight up sold. They could have held on to it and had the fattest bag possible, but they did not. And of course, you probably wouldn't expect Bitcoin to blow up. They cashed out their earnings and got $6 million out of it. Now, you might be wondering, how does a guy like Ross, who's running one of the biggest dark web sites at the time, decided to actually end up getting caught? Well, it was because Ross, for all of his intelligence, decided to, unfortunately, market using his real, actual Gmail account with his real fucking name. So how did this end up getting caught? Well, at some point, Silk Road decided to actually show this landing page. So one day you're signing on thinking that, man, I'm going to buy some cocaine off the internet. All of a sudden, you see the DOJ, the FBI, the fucking Department of Justice saying this hidden site has been seized by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, alongside the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. So at this moment in time, obviously, flares start going up. And the way Ross is found out is at one point, an IRS agent decides to look into the advertising for Silk Road. Now, at the time, Ross was known on the internet by his pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. So what had happened over here was Agent Gary Alford from the IRS CID decided to actually look into the Tor address. So remember, when you're looking at silkroad.com, anytime you access any of these websites, for instance, according to Wikipedia, these are the Silk Road URLs. Now, you would take these URLs, open up any Tor browser you have, or Brave, any browser that has Tor functionality, you would throw that onion link in, and lo and behold, you would visit the actual Silk Road. So, of course, at one point, an IRS agent decided to look into that URL and basically Google around on the internet. And there were a few hits that they ended up finding. For instance, on a website known as shroomery.org, where they talk about, again, as you can imagine, magic mushrooms. So, at one point, a user by the name of Altoid decided to actually come onto the site and say, I came across this website called Silk Road. It's a Tor hidden service that claims to allow you to buy and sell anything online anonymously. I'm thinking of buying off it, but wanted to see if anyone here had heard of it or could recommend it. I found it through silkroad420.wordpress.com. And of course, I actually did go to this website at the time, so I know it exists. And it takes you, again, this is through the Wayback Machine, thank God for preservation. It says Silk Road, anonymous marketplace. This ain't the Silk Road, but you're close. You're there. They would give you this link, TYD-GCC. And of course, you would put that into, again, Tor, and you would go to the Silk Road. So again, IRS, the agency, decided to look into that URL and started to look closer into these accounts. For instance, this one Shroomery account right here. Now, in one post on a website known as Bitcoin Forum, this user called Altoid was spotted again. Now, if you go to Altoid's page and you decide to look through their email, which is hidden, if you actually open up the last post of this person, you can start to see in this archival post, IT pro needed for venture-backed Bitcoin startup. So blah, 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 he talks about how they need an IT professional, but they mention an email, right? Send your answers to Ross Ulbricht at gmail.com. So, yeah. The man did not, in fact, hide his email. The poorest OPSEC one could fucking have. To the point where the Internal Revenue Service probably would have spent maybe like a day to look into this. And of course, once they found his personal email, it was then a simple matter of going to find where this dude was. And he was actually arrested on October 1st, 2013 in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Public Library. So this is actually the laptop that belonged to Ross Ulbricht at, I believe, the time of his arrest. So the FBI even writes, it's in their historical page, by the way, the laptop belongs to an American cyber criminal known online as Dread Pirate Roberts. So the FBI worked with federal and state partners to find the Silk Road. A tax agent discovered a post on the website in an online forum. 8 months later, the agent saw the same user had posted a job posting. And of course, down the road, they actually just talked about what they had done. So the FBI arrested him on October 1st. The judge sentenced Ulbricht to life in prison for drug trafficking, computer hacking, and money laundering in 2015. So yeah, that's how Ross was effectively taken down off of the internet. And, you know, there's videos from channels like Barely Sociable, great guy, who's covered a lot of this stuff in more depth than I have. But this is me just basically giving you just a quick viewpoint of like how this guy got arrested and why he's so fucking infamous. But inside all of this, there were a lot of things that Ross did that ultimately ended up being a little bit more shady than just facilitating a dark web marketplaces. For instance, we got to talk about the time when Ross had allegedly jumped down and issued some assassination orders for hire. So in one of his overt acts brought as a Ulbricht criminal complaint from, I believe, the state of New York, they had actually ended up saying from in and around January 2011, from around March 29, 2013, Ross Ulbricht, aka Dread Pirate Roberts, the defendant, in connection with operating the Silk Road website, solicited a Silk Road user to execute a murder for hire of another Silk Road user who was threatening to release the identities of thousands of users on the site. So yeah, that's a little wild. And you might be like, wait, why didn't this guy get like hit for that? Well, a lot of it is due to the fact that, you know, they already had him on like the drug facilitation, the website facilitation, and it really didn't seem like there was just a lot to really go off of. From my understanding and research into this, there were some exhibits released from the actual journal that was seized. Now, the way this murder for hire worked is obviously for the FBI and any law enforcement agency to look into this, they had to get access to his laptop without basically getting Ross to encrypt the laptop or delete files, you know, at the time. So basically what happened were apparently two federal agents were arguing and causing like a distraction. And once Ulbricht was distracted, agents moved in like the fucking like fear of God at this point. And one agent grabbed the laptop and handed it off, to which, again, a federal agent stuck in a flash drive into one of the USB ports and basically copied all of the actual files off of the, laptop. And at that moment in time, the federal agents were able to pick through, and one of the things they ended up finding was a diary, or a journal rather, that Ross had actually held on to, and it wrote some of his like deep secrets into. For instance, there's a couple posts from 2013 where again Ross is putting in like just standard stuff over here, for instance, and he's talking about things like DDoSing, people knowing the IP addresses. But one interesting part about it too was being blackmailed with user info, talking with large distributor Hell's Angels. Commissioned a hit on blackmailer with the Hell's Angels. Now, for anybody that doesn't know what the fuck the Hell's Angels are, the Hell's Angels, ladies and gentlemen, are a outlaw motorcycle gang. And yes, they are in fact fully on the tier of outlaws. If you go to the Hell's Angels website, they'll just tell you they're a motorcycle club in the Fontana, San Bernardino area of the United States of America. And whereas a lot of these, biker gangs come from, again, the California state, the Hells Angels are no joke. They are a outlaw motorcycle gang, an internationally recognized outlaw motorcycle gang. And again, according to, the research here, many Hells Angels members are involved in organized crime, such as drug trafficking and engaging in violent conflict with members of other outlaw motorcycle clubs and organized crime groups. Now, I want you to set that into your head because I'm painting you a picture. Ross is talking about facilitating crime with these actual scumbags, these criminals out there. You've got some real hardened, cold-blooded criminals, and you've got a computer nerd in San Francisco just talking to each other about setting hits. This is some real IRL Walter White ass shit we're talking about. Now, to give you an idea about some of the craziest criminal actions going on here, I'm going to read through, again, this is from Wired, where they go over some of the chat logs between Ross and, again, allegedly a Hells Angels criminal. Now, to give you the context of the story over here, Ross is apparently being threatened or blackmailed by another user on the site known as Friendly Chemist. And he's basically being blackmailed with the leaking of personal information, which obviously would be a pretty big issue for the Silk Road, which prides itself on anonymity. So according to Red and White, who is the Hells Angels gang member, I was asked to contact you. We're the people Friendly Chemist owes money to. He tells us that you owe him money and a long, boring story about some of this and some of that. As far as we're concerned, we gave him the product. Where it went and how it does not matter. We hold him and him responsible for the missing product and money. We don't care if you stole it from him. It was his responsibility to pay for it. So Brett Pirate Roberts comes in a day later and says, sorry for the delayed response. Friendly Chemists decide, let's talk about business. Obviously, you have access to illicit substances in quantity and are having issues with bad distributors. If you don't already sell on Silk Road, I'd like to consider you becoming a vendor. So allegedly, this is him actually communicating with a fucking notorious biker gang on setting up a channel for selling crazy amounts of drugs. Yeah, for anybody that says, the Silk Road didn't have like real cartels or criminals on them, is a Looney Tune right there, okay? You're crazy. A lot of these places have actual cartels operating on them, okay? Criminal factions. That's how it works. So at one point, Dread Pirate Roberts is like, Friendly Chemist is a liability, gives out his entire docs and information, and then talks about, I think you could be doing 1 million in sales a week. So it's like, all right, let's talk business. Also, here's the information of the guy I want dead. And of course, our Hells Angels friend is like, I already got that information. Thank you. 1 million sounds great on a week. Anyways, we've kidnapped Friendly Chemist partner Zin already and are on the hunt for Friendly Chemist. I'll keep you updated on the developments. So far, we're liking what this site is offering. It's like, bro, yeah, we kidnapped this one person. Anyways, let's talk about business. It's fucking crazy. The criminal world is wild. So you go down to Dread Pirate Roberts again, and he's like, I understand. And that's great news about Zin. I get the situation. He's the guy responsible. You should take your time and start slowly, okay? I want you to have a good time. It's crazy shit. So our friend Red and White is like, yeah, we're familiar with your tech. Anyways, we're able to recover all our missing product when we grabbed Zin. And after some questioning, he admitted he was intending on moving to a different country and setting up a new seller account. We don't take too kindly to thieves. He's gone. Dude, I swear to God, I'm believing this is more of a Fed than a Hell's Angels guy for sure. So Dread Pirate Robert's like, hey again, I hate to come to you with a problem when we're just starting to know one, but Friendly Chemist is causing me problems. You still looking for him? Or have you given up? So he starts like putting up a bounty on the head. And at this point, they start discussing like prices. It's like, Hell's Angels guy's like, what's the problem? We usually tend to stay away. I mean, hits are just bad for business. And so the discussion of, again, like how much the hit cost is also insane. Our friend in the Hell's Angels, like, price for a clean hit is like 300,000 USD, okay? Price for non-clean is 150 to 200,000, all right? So they basically talk about, like, they got 2 professional hitters, they got travel expenses. I mean, this is insane the more and more you look into it. I mean, they're actually discussing the pricing for a fucking hit. And of course, DPR here is like, I don't want to be a pain, but that seems a little bit too high. I had a clean hit done for 80,000, and our buddy in the Hell's Angels like, bro, what are you getting your Team ass assassinations? We charge at least a minimum of $150,000. And again, the more and more you read into it, the more and more other names start getting brought up, and it becomes like just one assassination to something straight out of like Breaking Bad, when Walter just goes after like all of Gus's crew in like prison, okay? It's crazy shit. Like literally we're talking about just ending human lives and just, paying like around 500,000 Bitcoin at the highest for it. It's just wild shit. And our buddy in the Hell's Angels like, don't worry, we're taking care of your problems. Also, how do we sell on your website? I mean, it's just an insane story. And ultimately, when you really factor in all of this, like at the end, the reason I've went through it is to show you Ross, who he is, some of the more controversial aspects around him. But I guess it's time to end this off with, what this pardon really means. Now, for Trump, who basically believes that drug dealers and drug cartels specifically should be branded as terrorists, which I do agree with, the drug cartels and the violence and crime they cause in their communities is very, very scary, especially if you actually read into what's going on with the Mexican drug war in Mexico. These people need to be stopped. But at the same time, pardoning somebody who I think personally has done a little bit more than just facilitating a free place for people to engage in their rather illegal vices is something that I probably don't think is the smartest play to have. Now, Ross, was his like sentence over heavy-handed? I would say probably so. Considering that, yes, even with these murder for hire plots, which ultimately didn't play into his actual conviction, just looking at him facilitating the Silk Road, I don't think is worth 2 life sentences plus 40 years. But again, I think it's just hilarious that he's basically been like commuted, like his life sentence has been pardoned. And again, at the end of all this, people have speculated, does he have like any money left over? Now, even if a whole chunk of money has been like forfeited by the U.S. Marshal Services, I highly doubt, okay, that this guy did not have money hidden around in other places. I'm sure Ross probably had money stashed away in other Bitcoin accounts. And if he does have like even 50,000 Bitcoin stashed away, or like just 1,000 even, he's effectively set for life. And honestly, at that point, he basically got away with running one of the most infamous dark websites on the internet. Now, for people who are into things like cryptocurrency, Ross is kind of like almost a messiah figure. Because if you really think about what Ross did with the Silk Road, he created one of the first real solid case utilities for Bitcoin. Nowadays, banks buy Bitcoins, investment firms buy it, the average person buys Bitcoin. But at the time, Bitcoin used to be this like meaningless, infantile currency that, wasn't really worth the actual price that it is now. And at the time, its main case use, and still to an extent, its case use, is facilitating illegal transactions. Now, obviously, with the amount of AML, KYC laws that have existed, that era of anonymity, and of course, some of these marketplaces that used to be some of the biggest things on the internet, in the early 2010s, they don't really exist anymore. And these are kind of like a fragment of the past, if anything. Ross was really a fucking legend when it came to running these places in the first place. But when it came to his OPSEC, that's what caused him to get pinched. And ultimately, Ross could have spent his entire life in prison, and if it wasn't for Trump being elected and the promises that were meant to be kept to the Libertarian Party, This guy would have rotted in prison for operating one of the most notorious websites on the internet. But he's out of prison, he's free, and if he's got money stashed away, then you bet he's set for life. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.